Hello YouTube, it's Zach. I'd like to start this by thanking the ex-Muslim community for sharing my story and supporting my cause, and I hope I can make a real difference in the world. So here's my story. I was raised in an extremely religious Salafi family. Now, a lot of people who were raised Muslim will probably identify with the more common things like music being off limits, satellite television being off limits, that kind of thing. But for me, it was a lot more than that. So I remember from very early ages, probably some of my earliest memories having to do with discussions surrounding that, surrounding jihad and surrounding warfare. I do remember watching a lot of propaganda films, a lot of battlefield footage, a lot of extreme violence that children were purposely exposed to. That also came with propaganda songs like this one. Childhood memories. Throughout my childhood, I had been convinced that I wanted to become a mujahid when I grew up. The problem is that even outside of the house, this type of thinking was not actively detested. A secularist is about the worst and dirtiest thing that you could possibly be within Saudi Arabian society, and so even some of the worst and the most anti-state views that are spread by Islamists and jihadists within, I would say, normal social groups were not very actively challenged. In many cases, not even challenged at all. So how did I get here? I don't know, but I count myself incredibly lucky. I'm certain that it started with questions and with the internet. Probably helped that I had little to no social life at the time, so I spent pretty much all of my time with nothing but my thoughts, my books, and my computer, not to mention the lack of peer pressure that I am sure helped a lot in my journey. I'd always been very interested in science, so I spent a lot of time watching documentaries and reading books on all sorts of different topics since I really had nothing much to do. I'd also always taken religion very seriously because when raised in an environment like that, you really don't have the option to be apathetic towards religion. So Islam is either true and we ought to kill and butcher each other for it, or it is false and thus an extremely dangerous ideology. I don't see another way about it, and I don't see how this perspective could ever be changed. Now, being raised the way I was, it was always clear to me that religion and science were two different systems of answering the very same questions. So at some point, something had to give, right? They had to clash. For me, evolution was where it was at. Being the obsessive person that I was, I can't just brush it off and let it go. I just had to know. More accurately, I had to prove to myself and to random strangers online that evolution was wrong. So I just had to educate myself on it. It really wasn't as much a duty for me than it was an obsession. It was a fascination. When you're fascinated with something like that, the truth just has to come out at some point and you have to accept it. Now, still far from being an atheist, but this opened a very important door for me, namely that of self-doubt and questioning what I've been taught growing up. I had to question and reinterpret scripture. When I opened the door to reinterpreting scripture and questioning what I'd been taught as a child, that was the beginning of my journey to self-discovery. Very few people know what it's like to be brought to tears in the depths of delusion and fear of doubt. And one story that specifically stands out and resonates with me is that of Armin Navabi, when he attempted suicide so that he would not have to reach the age of accountability. For a long time, my obsession was compulsively praying for doubt to go away and basically for me never to change my mind. And to think that a God would allow me to change my mind after all of that, if he truly is the God of Islam, then all I can say is that that guy is an asshole. Going into the world of the internet and my interest in debate, I was able, even as a religious person, to truly admire the way Richard Dawkins was able to speak and articulate himself. It still boggles my mind how I was able to admire someone whom I so strongly disagreed with at the time. Also, my interest in those discussions forced me to think about where I lay on issues such as women's rights, gay rights, secularism, free speech, and that kind of thing. And I had to come to terms with what I believed, what my scripture says, and what I can and cannot reinterpret. So, as part of the journey that I'm sure a lot of ex-Muslims will identify with, the hadith had to go out the window at some point because it's a load of bullshit. Not to say that the Quran is not a load of bullshit, but the hadith is much more obvious about it. The Quran gives a lot more leeway in being reinterpreted, but even then, you can only go so far. And even after doing everything that you possibly can, there are some very objectionable things over there that simply cannot be ignored. Even in its mildest form, the Quran still contains a lot of extremely problematic teachings such as slavery and wife beating. At some point when I was in a great deal of doubt and going on a camping trip, I decided to read the Quran critically for the first time. I'd read it several times before, but never really critically. And reading it with open eyes, it was very quickly clear to me that this is not something that aligns with my values as a human being. A verse that particularly stood out was the wife beating verse 434 in Nisa. There was so much obvious immorality in that book, and that was the end of the line. At some point, I didn't really care whether or not God existed or whether he wrote the Quran. If he did, then he certainly does not deserve any of my respect. But without the religious constraints of my mind, I very quickly realized that there was no evidence for the existence of God, and I really shouldn't worry about it. There was a certain euphoria to looking out into the vast emptiness for the first time and knowing that we're probably alone out there and there is no God. I completely understand the irony of having a quasi-religious experience in losing my religion. Thank you for watching, and I hope that through my content I can help show people that it's okay to doubt and it's okay to have a different opinion. We all deserve respect just the way we are. If you want more of my content, then please subscribe to my channel, and if you want to share my message, then please feel free to do so. Thank you.